Hello and welcome to Old Lady Plays. I'm Kate, the Old Lady, and this is RAF Lion, an experiment in using a war game to tell a story. In this case, the first day of the Battle of Britain. 0600, northwestern France. Having conquered Poland, Denmark, Norway, Netherlands, Belgium, and France, the Germans stand astride Europe as conquerors. Facing across the channel at them are the only holdouts, the British. Threats and cajolement have failed Hitler, and so he has decided at Reichsmarschall Göring's advice to implement a campaign of bombing to both crush civilian morale and destroy the Royal Air Force's fighting capacity. Göring knew that the morale crushing wouldn't happen. He'd seen it firsthand after the bombing of Guernica in the Spanish Civil War, where, despite the town being virtually flattened, resistance merely stiffened in the anger that people had been killed and made homeless. The goal of the destruction of the RAF was to clear the path for the Luftwaffe to destroy or ward off the Royal Navy, the only protection remaining behind the RAF for the British Isles. Operation Seelöwe was planned for mid-September, the invasion of Britain. But first, today, German air crews walked to their bombers, laughing and smoking, ebullient at the unleashing of a real campaign against the British. Fighter pilots climbed into their high-performance machines, ready to tangle with the Spitfire menace using the Bf 109. The weather is good, with patchy cloud ahead of Luftflotte 2, with the first raid of the day. 3 raids were planned for 0800 over the target: Worth radar station on the south coast, Tangmere airfield northwest of Portsmouth, and Kenley airfield south of London. Meanwhile, formations of transports and other aircraft would be making moves as though they were also bombers forming up, letting the British radar think that Farnborough and Rochester were targets also. Meanwhile, formations of transports and other aircraft would be making moves as though there were also bombers forming up, letting the British radar think that Farnborough and Rochester were targets also. Fighter Command faced a formidable task. Several squadrons were put up on patrol, from 234 Squadron in the west to 65 Squadron right on the Thames. 5 groups of a dozen men each held the line in the south of England. First to be detected was the Farnborough raid. This one was plotted early, but radar showed they were moving too slowly to be a bomber formation. Meanwhile, down the coast near Bournemouth, Worth radar station was the target for approximately 100 Junkers 88 bombers, a similar number of high-flying fighters, and a smaller group of Bf 110 Gesturen in close escort. 2 squadrons of 109s would fly in the Channel protection route, providing cover for the bombers flying home. Fighter Command's detection net worked well in one sense on this raid. It spotted it early. Unfortunately, with the broken cloud cover in Sector 4 of 10 Group, the Observer Corps were unable to get good intelligence on the raid's size or destination. They knew it was 4 Sector, but where? The decision was made quickly. 234 Squadron would vector in on the raid from their patrol, while 152 Squadron scrambled from Middle Wallop Airfield. Both groups of Spitfires knew there was a major raid incoming, but nothing more yet. As the raid grew closer, the squadrons pounced, diving on the bombers from the northwest. Immediately engaged by the 109s of Jagdgeschwader 53 and 27 from out of the sun, the fighters were soon entangled in a whirling melee. While the Germans had to regroup after the fight separated, 152 Squadron had taken some losses and had been driven off with 234 Squadron. Nothing flying would now engage the bombers. Their work done, fuel low, the 109s turned for France while the bombers droned on. When they reached Worth radar, they released their loads one after another until the station was a smoking wreck. It would be out for days being repaired. The Germans had struck a hard early blow. Luftwaffe 2 had the honor of the next diversionary raid, luring a squadron to oppose what appeared to be a minor raid on Rochester, but which melted away before crossing the North Sea. They also mounted the next real raid, which launched at Tangmere airfield in Sector 1 of 11 Group. The raid would pass near Portsmouth on its path. Once again, the chain system of radars did its job, though it was fortunate that Worth was not needed. Warning was early, and with the lighter cloud covering the east of the coastline, the observers were able to perform to a higher standard. Intelligence was limited, but they knew at least that the raid was about the size of the one hitting Worth. 100 109s again accompanied 188s across the channel, with a similar number of 110s in close escort. But these weren't just any 110s. These were the elite Erprobungsgruppe 210 and the Lehrgruppe 2, two highly trained and talented groupmen of top pilots. Jagdgeschwader 3 would take the channel patrol. Rising to meet them were 601 Squadron of Hurricanes, scrambled from Tangmere, and 43 Squadron Spitz, vectored in off patrol. The fight began in earnest about 40 kilometers from Portsmouth over the channel, with the first American volunteers to fly for the RAF among them. The fight was going well until unexpected visitors arrived, an undetected escort formation bringing two Staffeln of 109s from Jagdgeschwader 3 into the battle. Once again the RAF were driven off, this time the Spitfires of 43 Squadron losing several men and machines, while the Germans of Jagdgeschwader 51 took their own falls. A draw, call it, but a draw favors the offense in this case. The Germans had more planes and more pilots. The British had the aircraft, but precious few to fly them. 145 Squadron was able to scramble out of the way of the incoming bombers, dispersing to other local airfields. But Tangmere soon fell under heavy bombardment and took a complete flattening. Multiple holes pocked the landing fields and several aircraft were destroyed on the ground. Finally, as the clock moved closer to 1000, the last raid came in. Kenley airfield between Brighton and London would be the target. Again, a similar-sized raid was spotted, firmed up very early by the radar, but the observers struggled this time, with the raid proceeding offshore until the last moments before turning north for Kenley. Intercepting just before crossing the coast, one squadron was diverted from patrolling over London to help 111 Squadron, also Hurricanes, and 64 Squadron of Spitfires. A flight of Stukas numbering about 50 was making their slow way north when the squadrons arrived, with just as many Bf-110s in close escort. What the British hadn't spotted was the formation of nearly 200 Bf-109s accompanying the Stukas up high, and when they moved into attack, the 109s swooped. .111 Squadron, flying the highest, took the brunt of the first attack, turning away with heavy losses. 64 and 1 Squadron bravely fought on, getting some of their aircraft through to attack the bombers. The German fighters were largely unaffected, having a near 6-to-1 advantage in aircraft. However, the RAF were, in this case, able to put enough fire on the Stukas to turn them back before they could reach Kenley. One airfield saved, even if at the cost of most of a squadron of Hurricanes doing it. Now came a respite, 2 important hours in which the British could land, rearm, refuel, and get aloft again. It was these rest periods which allowed them to maintain any kind of resistance. 3 raids in a 2-hour period had left the defences stretched thin. The Germans weren't idle, of course. They had more raids planned for the noon hour. Preliminary warnings showed the southern part of LF2's area would be the next target, followed by the eastern area of LF2. 7 squadrons rose to patrol southeast England, from Dunwich to Southampton. All of Fighter Command were again on high alert when the alarm went up. Raid forming over Belgium. Early indications were that the radar system was the target again, with Rye Station the place with its head in the noose. Vectored in off patrol, 54 Squadron of Spitfires arrowed across to help 501's Hurricanes to respond to the raid. It was shaping up to be a big one, but there were others out there forming up, so that was all they could commit to the defense. 150 Dornier 17s, the so-called Flying Pencil, would make up the ground attack portion of the force, along with a swarm of 109s, 250 of them flying high cover, a flight covering channel patrol and another flying close escort. Both squadrons bravely threw themselves into a fight they couldn't possibly win. Against 10 times their number, the Spitfires took the brunt of the losses, 54 Squadron being driven off with heavy casualties, and 501 chased away as well. The bombers would once again drop their loads unopposed. Broken clouds had moved in over the eastern section of England, meaning the bombers were less effective than they wished, but this was not enough to stop them from destroying Rye radar station completely. It would take days to rebuild. With 2 links out of the net, the radar net was now crippled, half-blinded. Once again, a brief period of respite allowed the RAF to get sorted out. Many aircraft had been lost over the day, but most of the pilots had been able to bail out and be rescued to fight again. The RAF would fight on. A strong patrolling force had been posted in this tea-time hour, 15 squadrons in all, across all of 11 Group. When the notice went up that it was a major raid, a decision was taken to commit hard to destroy this raid, and the raiders. 8 squadrons would respond. Vectored to the coast, they prepared for the incoming raid. But it never showed. Decoyed again, but this time they'd fallen for it. The real target was Beachy Head radar, next west from Rye, whose loss would leave that entire stretch of coast with just a single radar station to protect it. With another major raid predicted, the squadrons committed were 1 of Spitfires, 64, and 3 of Hurricanes, 145, 601, and 615 Squadron. As the raid approached, it was determined that it was a huge one. 100 109s would be on channel patrol. 150 110s would form the close escort, including the 2 elite Gripen noted above. A forced 200 Heinkel 111s would come crashing ashore at Beachy Head, accompanied by 200 more 109s. All in all, the raid involved nearly 650 aircraft. Against this massive force stood just 50 planes, outnumbered 7 to 1 by fighters alone. Still, they flew into the fight. One bit of good fortune, due to broken cloud over the target area, the German forces were somewhat scattered out of their formations. Affected were about half each of the bomber and fighter forces. Suddenly the odds looked better for the RAF. In the fight, 145 Squadron took the hardest hit, taking light losses, while 615 was also driven off. 64 and 601 Squadrons pressed home the attack on the bombers. Light losses inflicted on 2 of the bomber Gripen sent them reeling back to Belgium, while the other bombers and 110s bored in on the target. With clouds nearly solid over the target, they attacked with low-level bombing, and by the time they'd finished, Beachy Head was out of action too, but only for a day or 2. An hour's rest allowed some of the British fighters to get back on station as the last raid of the day arrived. Once again, it was Beachy Head that would be the target, the Germans trying to flatten it properly. Given reasonable warning, the RAF found 6 squadrons to pull off patrol and respond to the major raid, half Spits and half Hurries. Once again, a 109 heavy raid was planned, with 150 flying cap, 100 more on close escort, and the usual 100 waiting over the channel for the sheep coming home. 200 bombers, a mix of Dorniers, Stukas, and Heinkels, were coming for Beachy Head. 3 squadrons of Spitfires peeled off to take on the cap, while the Hurricane squadrons bore in on the bombers. The Germans dove from on high, gaining an altitude advantage over the British, but it wasn't enough. 65 Squadron batters through to the bombers, while 64 is sent away with light loss and 74 is driven back. 1, 32, and 501 Squadron all joined 65 in attacking the bombers. Neither side was able to gain much of an advantage, taking light losses on both sides, but only one group of bombers was able to make the attack, failing to make any lasting damage. And as the light finally fades on this horrible day, the British Lion licks its wounds and looks to tomorrow, when the Eagle will come again, and again, and again. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation of a game of RAF Lion, the prelude to Eagle Day scenario. Stay tuned to this channel for a more conventional playthrough of the Hardest Days scenario over the next couple of weeks, followed by RAF Eagle after that, and the 2-player version to finish. Join my Discord, it's linked in the description. I hope you have a great day, and take care.